Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel for another makeup mystery video. This is where I sit down, I do my makeup, and I talk about something true crime related. So today I'm going to be talking about something rather creepy. So I'd never heard of this case before, but I was just doing some research on Google and then happened to stumble across it, and I was freaked out. So before I do start actually talking about it, I'm just going to give a little disclaimer. This video is for educational purposes and it is made from a collection of sources that I have found on the internet, and they are listed down below. And of course, I mean absolutely no disrespect when I'm talking about anyone in today's case. So today I'm going to be talking about the HINTERKAIFECK murders. This is one creepy story, and it's actually an unsolved murder case. So the story takes place on the HINTERKAIFECK farm in Bavaria, which is in Germany. And we're going back in time again to the year 1922. So on this farm there lived 6 people, and they were a family. There was 35-year-old Victoria Gabriel. She was a widow. She lived there with her 2 children, 7-year-old Kazelia and 2-year-old Joseph. Her parents lived on the farm with her as well, her dad Andreas and her mum Kazelia. We do have 2 Kazelias in this story, but I'll just refer to the younger Kazelia or the older Kazelia. And they also had the family maid Maria. So the Gruber family who lived on this farm, they were kind of known to keep to themselves. They went outside, they socialised with people, but they were quite a reserved family. The farm was kind of in the middle of nowhere. They did have neighbouring houses and stuff, but it was a very rural area. They were quite a religious family, they always went to church, and Victoria was actually a member of the church choir. Andreas was known in the town as an abusive man. He would domestically abuse his wife, Kazelia. There was also this rumour going around that he was having an incestuous relationship with his daughter, Victoria. There's always incest in these stories, I don't understand. So the rumours were that he was having this incestuous relationship with his daughter, Victoria, and Joseph was actually his son. Apparently he banned Victoria from marrying another man after her husband had passed away. Obviously though, these are all just rumours, it's not set in stone. We don't know if they were having a relationship, we don't know if Joseph was his son or not, we don't know. So yeah, they're just this pretty average farm family, I suppose, unless they were having incestuous relationships, then they weren't so average. Alright, so people started to notice something was weird when little Kazelia didn't turn up for school. Also, no one in the family had showed up for church, so people were starting to get a little bit suspicious. For every single member of the household to miss church, it's a little bit suspicious. Fair enough, just one person not turning up, but because none of them turned up and no one had heard anything, it just was out of the ordinary. So on the 4th of April, the family's neighbours decided to go and investigate. A farmer who lived nearby called Lorenz Wittenberg, he decided to lead the search party. When they arrived at the house, they found all of the family and the maid slaughtered. So in the barn, there were 4 brutally murdered bodies, and they were covered with hair. And then inside the house, the bodies of 2-year-old Joseph and the maid Maria were also found. Also, it was the maid's first day on the job, damn. So I'm briefly going to go back and I'm going to talk about some of the events that led up to this attack, because there were some strange things going on. So 6 months before the attack, the family maid had quit. This was the maid before Maria. So the maid quit because she thought the house was haunted. She kept on hearing strange voices and footsteps coming from the attic. In March 1922, Andreas had found a newspaper on their property, and this was a newspaper that they hadn't subscribed to. Andreas thought it was strange because they were in the middle of nowhere, so it was a bit odd for a random newspaper to just turn up on their property if no one in their family had put it there. However, he kind of believed it was from another house in the area and the postman had dropped it off by accident. This was not the case, however, because the newspaper that Andreas found was a newspaper that not a single person in the area was subscribed to. So that's weird. Alright, you ready for something creepy? So a few days before the murders, Andreas found some footprints in the snow that led from the forest to the farm's machine room. The door to the machine room, the lock had been broken, and what makes this creepy is the tracks did not lead away from the house. Around the same time, a set of house keys had also gone missing. The same night that Andreas had found the footprints in the snow, the family kept on hearing footsteps in the attic. Andreas went out to the attic, to check on them. No one was there. He told a lot of people in the area about these occurrences, which is like how we know about them, but he refused to go to the police about it. I guess because he thought they just wouldn't do anything, right? It's a bit of a weird thing to go to the police with. So Kazelia had told her friends at school that she had seen a man with a mustache staring at their house. Oh, it's actually so gross, it's making me cry. She had told her friends at school that she had seen a man with a mustache stood on the edge of the forest near their house, and he was just stood watching their house. How gross is that? Okay, that is everything. So this is what is suspected that happened. So in the late evening of Friday the 31st of March, Victoria, her 7-year-old daughter Kazelia, and her parents Andreas and Kazelia were taken to the barn and they were murdered one at a time. It's suspected that they were all led there and then just killed one at a time. They were all killed with a pickaxe and they were all hit over the head. After the murders, the bodies were stacked on top of each other and then bits of hair like thrown over them, I guess, to bury them. That's what they think. So the elder Kazelia, she had been strangled, she had 7 blows to the head, and she also had a cracked skull. The face of her husband Andreas, it was just caked with blood, and his cheekbones were literally like sticking out from his skin. Like you could see the bone. Victoria's head had been severely smashed in. Her head showed 9 star-shaped wounds and the right side of her face had been hit with a blunt object. So the younger Kazelia, her jaw had been shattered and her face and neck were just covered in gaping wounds. The perpetrator then moved inside the house and he used the same murder weapon to kill Maria in her bedchamber and Joseph in his crib. Maria was killed by several blows to the head and Joseph was killed with just 1. Like the bodies in the barn that had been covered by the hair, their bodies were also covered. Maria's body was covered by her sheets and Joseph was covered with one of his mother's dresses. So all of that happened on Friday, and there were 4 days that preceded where people didn't know what happened, people didn't even know these people were dead. So the next day, on April the 1st, a couple of coffee sellers arrived at the house to place an order. They knocked on the doors, they knocked on the windows, but there was absolutely no answer. It was like no one was home. They walked around the house, you know, checking everything out, checking everything was okay. They noticed that the gate to the machine house was open and then they left. It's weird they didn't look in the barn, you know? So a couple of days later, on Monday the 3rd of April, the postman Joseph Mayer, he was delivering mail to the family and he noticed that Saturday's mail was still there. It was still in the exact same place, it was untouched, and he thought that was a bit strange, but you know, they could have been busy, they could have just forgot. After further inspection, it was discovered that the killer had stayed in the house over the weekend. Plates had been used in the kitchen and eaten from, and neighbours reported smoke coming from their chimney all weekend. A guy called Albert Hoffner, he visited the farm on the 4th of April. He was like an assembler or like a mechanic or something, and he basically visited the farm to fix the engine on the food chopper. He said when he got there he didn't see anything, he couldn't like find anyone, he waited for an hour, he said that he heard sounds of the dog coming from inside the barn. After an hour he decided to just go ahead and start his repair, which took him roughly 4.5 hours. And while he was there he didn't see anyone. He noted how creepy the whole farm was. So around 3:30 p.m. on the same day, the 4th of April, the guy I mentioned earlier, Lorenz Wittenberg, he sent his sons, Joseph and Johann, to the farm to see if they could find anyone, see if the family were home. This was basically when the family hadn't shown up for church and school, so people were starting to get worried, so he was like, just send the boys over, just check on the family to see if they're okay. The boys returned a short while after, saying the family weren't home, they couldn't see anyone, so Lorenz decided to go out himself to see if he could find them. He took a couple of other neighbours with him and they went on over to the farm, and that is when they discovered the 4 bodies in the barn and the 2 bodies inside the house. The farm was later demolished in 1923. This revealed the evidence of the pickaxe. It was in the attic, which was obviously the murder weapon. There was also a penknife that was found in the barn. So as soon as the bodies were found, an investigation quickly started. So the investigation was led by a guy called George Rain Gruber, and at first, the initial investigation was set back because of the amount of people that had been in the crime scene and had kind of like contaminated it. The bodies had been moved around, and like I said, plates had been eaten off of, objects in the house moved around. It was found that the daughter Kazelia, she had been alive for several hours after the attack. She had torn her hair out in tufts while she was lying in the straw. She was probably just in so much pain and agony, and she was so stressed and scared that she did this. The first person to be killed was most likely Victoria, followed by the older Kazelia, then Andreas, and then finally the younger Kazelia. In the house, the maid was killed first, and then Joseph. So as part of the investigation, the victims' heads were actually removed. They were sent to Munich to be further investigated, but all of the heads were lost. It's believed it had something to do with like World War II bombings, like maybe the place where they were being kept was bombed and they just like lost them forever. But that's 6 heads. Like, how do you just lose 6 heads? But they never found the heads again, and of course all of the bodies, they were buried headless, and they were buried on Saturday the 8th of April. So initially, police believed that the murder was a robbery. However, no money was reportedly taken from the house, and there was also large clumps of money just laying around the house. So that just makes it even creepier. The fact that there was literally some money left out in their house, like on the side, and they didn't take it, that's weird. That just makes it even more sadistic. So they were 100% certain that someone had stayed with them in the house over the weekend. This is because someone had fed the cattle, milked the cows, eaten the entire supply of bread from the kitchen, had recently cooked meat from the pantry. The police were just stumped for a motive, so decided, you know, let's look for some suspects. Overall in the investigation, there were over 100 suspects that were questioned, but they could not pin it on anyone. One of their key suspects was actually Lorenz Schlittenbauer. He was the guy who had initially led the search party and sent his sons to check on the farm. So apparently, and this is another like, we're not sure if this is true. So apparently he was involved in a romantic relationship with Victoria, and her son Joseph was actually his child. I mean, it's not certain, and some people thought that Joseph's dad was Victoria's dad, so like, I'm not sure. Apparently on Joseph's birth certificate it said LS on there, so people think, you know, he could have been the dad, but that could have just been like the doctor who was present. Another reason why he was a suspect was that he just happened to have a key to their house. This could have been because he was having an affair with Victoria, or it could have been the set of keys that went missing a few days before. When the search party arrived at the crime scene, the 2 neighbours went inside the barn, and Lorenz went straight inside the house. He went inside alone, and when he was later asked about this, like, why did you go inside the house, he just said, I wanted to see if my son was in there. This could be true or false, but it is known for a fact Lorenz did move some of the bodies at the crime scene. Many years after the murders, Lorenz would make like strange comments about it, kind of stuff that implied he knew more than he was letting on, and things that only like a killer would know. So he was seen in 1925, stood outside the farm, which was demolished at this point. He was seen by a local teacher who went over to him and asked, what are you doing? He said that the murderer had attempted to bury the family in the barn, but couldn't because the ground was frozen, so covered them with hay instead. I don't know if he's like talking about this because he's like trying to figure out who did it, and he's so like upset about it because he was in love with Victoria, or he actually did it. Like, it's really creepy. So another suspect in the murders, or I should probably say suspects, they were the Gump brothers. So Adolf Gump, he was apparently another guy who was involved in a romantic relationship with Victoria. However, again, there is no evidence to support this. So Adolf Gump had actually participated in the murder of 9 peasants in a place called Silesia, so he'd killed before. His brother Anton was also a suspect. Their sister Crescentia, she had said on her deathbed that they had done it. They were taken into custody and questioned, but there was no further evidence against them. There were some other brothers who were suspect in the case as well. They were called Carl and Andreas. So Carl and Andreas's mother had visited the mother of a little girl called Teresa. Teresa had overheard the conversation and heard the woman say to her mother her sons had killed these people on the farm and her son had lost his penknife. Do you remember me saying earlier a penknife was later found in the barn? A penknife was eventually found at the crime scene, but it was never identified as to who it was. It could have potentially been one of the family members who was killed. Police considered the idea of a murder-suicide between Andreas and Victoria, but they quickly ruled that out. The wounds were too inconsistent and it just didn't really make any sense. There was a serial killer in North America at the same time of these murders, and he was called Paul Muller. He wasn't caught until after this event. But some people believed that this crime fit his MO. He basically slaughtered families in America, and a pickaxe was always his chosen weapon. Also, at all of his crime scenes, there was no robbery, there was no money taken from them. It could be possible that he came across to Germany and did it, but honestly that sounds like a little bit of a stretch, but you know, it is possible. In 2007, a team of police academy students tried to solve the murder using modern day technology. They narrowed their suspect list down to one person, but they never revealed who they thought it was, just for the sake of their living relatives. So going back to 1922, on April the 1st at 3 AM, a local farmer in the area called Simon, I cannot even begin to pronounce his last name, so I'm just going to call him Simon. He had seen two men chatting next to the forest that was next to the farm. As soon as they saw Simon, apparently, they turned around so he couldn't see their faces, and that was it. Simon didn't really think anything of this at the time until later when he heard about the murders. He was like, that was a bit suspicious. So the repairman that I talked about earlier, Albert Hoffner, who came to the house, who was fixing the engine of the food machine, he was also a potential suspect. He was not found to be the killer, however, and he believes that the killer was in the yard during the time of his repair. So before he went into the machine house, he noticed how the house was locked up and the dog was barking inside the barn or the house. When he finished his repair and he came out, he noticed that the dog was tied up outside the barn and the barn door was open. The next day when people were at the house again, they said that the dog was heard inside the barn and it was closed. So this definitely shows someone was there, someone was moving stuff around. So a few years later, in May 1927, there was a strange man who stopped a resident of the area around midnight. He basically screamed in this resident's face saying that he was the murderer, and then he ran into the forest. I think he was just a crazy fool, honestly. Anyway, this guy was never identified. After the family house was demolished, a plaque was actually put outside of the house where it remains to this day. This case has gone down in German history, and some people believe that it's Germany's most notorious unsolved murder case. There have been books, articles, documentaries, films about this case, but we're just no closer to knowing what actually happened. I just think we'll never find out who did it. It was so long ago, the evidence was contaminated, the bodies moved, we'll never know. And we can't exactly go back to the crime scene and look now because the house was demolished. If I was gonna guess at anyone, I think the Lorenz guy was a pretty interesting suspect. He had keys to the house and he went inside the house first. He could have hidden something or done something, who knows. Anyway, that is everything for today's video. That is as much as I can possibly give to you. I don't have any more information on this case. I still don't know who this person is that killed them. What do you guys think happened? Who do you think did it, and why do you think they stayed days after the murders in the farmhouse? It's one crazy story and it creeped me the hell out. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed. As always, if you do have any requests of any cases you would like me to cover, please just leave them in the comments box down below. And yeah, that is everything. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!